Alright guys, welcome to September 10th Zoom. I'm pretty much going to follow up what we discussed on Tuesday, and based on pretty much what happened throughout Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday today, we got a pretty decent reaction to the upside, and it's, in my opinion, we're approaching a very unclear directional bias. Well, I wouldn't say fully unclear, but let me more so say what I mean. Because, for example, right, we had emphasized, or we had pointed out on EU, right, the bearish potential order flow, which was the pullback to the upside. So that, right, something to note here is where our legs are placed. Our solidified high is up here. A solidified low is down here based on preliminary structure break. And this is essentially the start of the pullback. So that bearish order flow could have potentially been a type of pullback. But here's the thing. Not only did we have a potential reaction here, I believe we mentioned that on Tuesday. Pretty much the reaction, the structural disruption, everything that aligns with this relative area here. And as you can see, that not only broke through the POI, but led to take out liquidity previously held. So with that being said, liquidity was taken, right? A potential 50% based on here was taken, but this has led into a preliminary structure break, solidifying this as the pullback high based on the preliminary structure break. So technically, you know, we're technically bearish from the leg perspective, but obviously this is right, a very excuse me, a very strong push to the upside, which took the preliminary leg. So we're pretty much approaching a very significant point in terms of whether this move is going to be a pullback, right, potential POI wherever we meet, and then leads to more upside movement, or right, we're going to see the current mitigations in place, the current order flow in place to lead us lower to then give us pullback continuation. Right, so it's a pretty important spot, and the reason why I call it important too is because we are seeing a sign of unwillingness here. If we start zooming in into the specific range, you can see, right, that we obviously have unwillingness. We just don't have the preliminary structure break intact. So let me see. So with our preliminary high not being broken, right, obviously our leg is still bearish, right? Our preliminary leg is here, the last time a substantial new low was created based on the previous low. So right, this is technically, right, because we took preliminary structure, this is technically the solidified high. So this is really, you know, a potential sign of reversal as long as this relative area is respected from the inefficiency to the wick to the invalidation point, because this is the previous mitigation point here. So this is a very decisive area of interest, because either we're going to go from here or we're going to break and then, you know, give us that continuation that we mentioned. Right, so it's just a matter of time to see whether we're going to see any type of strong reaction to the upside or not. But just going based on the weekly, this is looking pretty bearish in my opinion, because remember the original bias that we had pretty much mentioned a couple weeks ago was potentially having this as a liquidity grab, which led us to bearish structure, bearish continuation, right? So it's just a matter of time of seeing if we are going to respect that bearish movement, or if we're going to see a sign of reversal, which, even as you can see with the momentum being relatively slow here, it's, you know, it's basically 50-50. Going on to AU, to delete this. Another interesting one, because looking at our weekly, right, it looks relatively bullish in my opinion. Why? Because of the mitigation in place, the preliminary structure breaks, 2 strong candles to the upside, and although we have strong volume inside of this weekly candle, we don't have much movement. So as we start zooming in, it really looks like this could go essentially up, right, if we are respecting our internal structure to the upside. And just going off of literally just what I'm seeing here, I know we covered this, why this area did not, why it didn't make sense, because we had a reaction, then came into the point of interest. But as you can see, right, just currently reading what's happening now, I see, right, this mitigation inside of a potential liquidity grab, which was solidified after this high was broken. So we have a strong push to the upside post mitigation, signifying strong order flow. Our final leg, our preliminary leg, was taken here, right? So we're essentially, right, if we go back to H2, this is our essential breaking point, our moment of whether we're going to solidify a bullish bias, or if we break, we have, you know, a reason to believe we'll come back to meet these lows, right? So essentially, if we give a strong reaction here, then we will continue higher. But if we continue lower, break the POI potentially up to here, another potential POI, I would need a transition here because we're taking preliminary structure in order to meet here, so it's technically picking a low. But right, if we give, you know, a strong momentum to the downside, then it really makes all the sense in the world if we have low momentum to the said pullback to then start aiming for lows, right? But especially just after the reaction that we're seeing now, especially from a minor intraday perspective, right, our preliminary high was taken, then immediately given a pullback, then unwillingness based on, you can see that wick there. This has now given a transition, right? Let me actually highlight the wick for you guys. During session today, this was right, so we have the pullback after the major break of structure, but we have to also acknowledge that we have just taken a major area of liquidity. So the major area of liquidity, the equal highs there have been taken. We now have the M15 wick, which caused an internal liquidity grab here. Internal liquidity grab, right, which then gave us a relative premium, right, a relative premium. But unfortunately, there was no strong POI that I felt like I could have traded off of this, so I just let it go. Yeah, I just let this go. But either way, we see this change of character. We see a minor premium, right? And even though that did not essentially give us a strong entry, the narrative was built after this minor premium, gave us then the full scalp break of structure after the final scalp leg. And I don't want to consider this part of the leg, part of the liquidity grab. I want to consider this still the full leg, because we still could mitigate here and, you know, give us potential movement to the upside. But as you can see, then the scalp structure was taken, And as you can see, the M3 inefficiency gave a very nice reaction. 2.5 pips. Excuse me. All right, moving on to EU. This one also a bit unclear, just because it was relatively sloppy after Tuesday. Looking at Tuesday, which was the 7th, right, we got the bearish order flow intact, and that pretty much led us to not only take out preliminary structure, which was the target that we had, been anticipating, but we also did not mitigate anything, in my opinion, that was clear. So if we zoom out, right, we will see, right, that we do have an inefficiency fill there, but it is not clean. This inefficiency here is not clean. You can see we went beyond it. So I'm trying to figure out, whenever I'm trying to derive a bias, where we are mitigating from to derive any type of strong bias, which is what will lead me to this. And as you can see, now this is a clear mitigation. Now I know what picture is painted, right? And I know a lot of you, based on that mitigation, then took the inefficiency in place, right? But however, right, even though this is technically a this is a valid buy just because the preliminary leg was taken, and although there was bearish order flow still intact, this could have easily been a type of hedge position to your previous bearish order flow move. But even though this reaction has given us a move to the upside, I want to acknowledge what's happened today. I want to acknowledge the fact that we had taken the major leg, right, that caused the bullish breaker structure, and even took liquidity here, as you can see. So that not only ran through previous structure points that gave a strong reaction to the downside, unwillingness, and a breaker structure. The breaker structure leading into where we are right now, which is M5 wick, M3 candle, right, M5 wick, right, and that's valid because we have mitigated that wick as well. So now, right, if I'm looking at this, right, major point, right, of invalidation is our previous low. Are we going to reverse? And the only reason why I'm considering the reversal is because strong momentum leading into the POI, and the POI had 1 touch, 2 touch, which does not look like a mitigation to me internally. Yeah, it doesn't really look like a mitigation internally. Yeah, it doesn't look. Yeah, you can see we already mitigated there, so this move to the downside isn't really making sense. So that's kind of why I'm considering why this could be a potential move. Obviously it's Friday, so I do want to see how we close for the week. And just like AU, it's looking a little bullish just from a weekly perspective. Obviously from an internal perspective, we could argue otherwise, just because of the minor intraday structure break, right? We're still internally bearish, right? So we could still see a bearish continuation to the downside, which is honestly what I would like to see, just because it's continuing momentum. And although the preliminary leg was challenged, right, we now have a showing its hand of a potential continuation to the downside. GU, let's see. Not one I touched this week too much. I know that we had the dip on, I believe, Wednesday. Yeah, the dip on Wednesday, which took liquidity. And although it didn't reach our POI that we had, acknowledged back then, right, we saw a change of character, a change of momentum, a change of structure after the slow created a minor intraday high. Right, doesn't even matter what high you want to go off of here, but technically this is a preliminary, and up here would be your full leg, based on minor intraday. But as you can see, this then led to inefficiency, and that pretty much has given us a bullish reaction, right? But this is also one that isn't making much sense to me, just because of how deep we retraced. Now that we're seeing a bullish reaction and another bullish reaction, I do want to read internal structure to see if we're going to sustain this bullish movement or not. Like, for example, here, right, in a major point. However, you would need a transition here because we have already taken a previous structure point. This is also a liquidity grab. So realistically, from a bearish perspective now, even this makes a lot of sense. Just based on looking at M15. Right, so we could be seeing a potential reversal, at least, you know, beginning of midweek, beginning of next week, I'm sorry. And that could easily lead us into some type of discount, whether it's inefficiency down here. I don't really see any strong POIs here, even though we could play off of anything here. I would like to see what happens if we start retracing lower, because technically this full leg to the upside is bullish, but if we break preliminary structure, even though this is the preliminary leg here, if we break the overall preliminary structure here, I could see this as unwillingness based on this previous high. So this would be unwillingness based on this previous high. So if that happens, then you can anticipate a bearish movement. But yeah, with that being said, I mean, very interesting week. I know I showed you guys on, I believe it was, I forgot what day it was, the structural disruption that I showed you guys during session. Let me see if I can find them. I don't know why that never works. See if I remember the exact. Nope. Let's see if I could find these messages. Alright, well, let me actually remember what day it was. It was, I believe, the 8th. Because it was after our Zoom. It was around 9. Oh, here we go. Found it. Cool. Right, why this made sense. So here, right, I can't annotate. It's a recording, but I mean it's a I'm not on Zoom. So as you can see, right, I noted a previous mitigation. Previous mitigation gave a reaction, then gave 1 tap, and I mean 2 tap, 3 tap, 4 tap, and that to me, weak order flow. This POI does not make sense for this to make price go higher. This then created a new structural range to the downside, but I don't want to immediately rush myself into wanting to take this candle here, because not only has the open been taken, right, but I'm also observing whether here could be a potential reaction. But at the same time, this is inside of the discount based on high to low, right? So as you can see, this led into a continuation BOS, which solidifies the low, and this is now the high, and this is now the preliminary range here. So because this continuation BOS immediately led into a reversal, into a bearish liquidity grab, this shows me structural disruption, which is why I showed this to you all, because it's good to see this, you know, in real time. And as you can see, right, immediately after the reaction, right, we see another 2 bullish candles. Right, I didn't want to rush into this trade just because I wanted to, you know, allow this to show its hand, And as you can see, momentum definitely showed a 10 there. Strong momentum, right? Left an SC and inefficiency behind. So this was really just my entry here, aiming previous liquidity, which was the previous low. And as you can see, that is a very good short-term trade. I probably wouldn't hold this longer because I did catch a scalp continuation. So from a swing or a major intraday perspective, it's a lot harder for me to justify holding this. So this is where a major part of the position comes off, because I know that I've already taken a large liquidity spot. So I know this could easily start to reverse on me, which I believe it did. 73.70. Yeah, it was here, previous liquidity, and then as you can see, came back to pull back. And also you have to acknowledge that we are pretty overextended in the leg. High, low, high, low, high, low, high, low, high, unwillingness, break of structure. So because we were already such deep in the leg, it was really hard for me to try to justify holding this any longer. But yeah, with that being said, I'll see you guys on Tuesday.